Hey everybody, I'm ZombieJohnny, and today we're going to be taking a look at another one of Hayao Miyazaki's works. This is Shuna's Journey. One thing before we move on to the review, today I'm going to be taking a look at the complete story. So it's going to be going from cover to cover, and we're going to take a look at the whole thing, so spoilers ahead.
Shuna's Journey is written and illustrated by Hayao Miyazaki and was published by Tokuma Shoten in Japan in 1983 and second books in North America in 2022. Shuna's Journey is based off of the Tibetan folktale The Prince Who Turned Into a Dog. In Miyazaki's author's notes, he explained that he had always wanted to turn this into an animation, but at that time he felt it wasn't a story that was suitable for the big screen. After some convincing from the publishing company Tokuma Shoten, he decided to make it into a visual novel. The journey begins. The story begins in a small kingdom at the bottom of a valley. This kingdom in the bottom of the valley is placed on land that yields very few crops. We are then introduced to Shuna. He is the prince of this troubled kingdom. One day he happens upon a collapsed traveler. This traveler is from lands far from the kingdom. Shuna brings the traveler back to the kingdom to heal. The traveler tells Shuna a story much like his own. The traveler's lands are far to the east and barren and hard to grow any crops on. He then tells Shuna about the golden seed, a seed which can turn any barren lands into lush farmlands that yield many crops. After that, the traveler passes away, but Shuna is left with a burning desire to find this golden seed. Shuna tells the elders of the kingdom that his mind is made up, and he begins preparations for his journey far to the west. He sets forth across lands that have not seen another living soul for many ages. To the west. Shuna then stumbles upon what appears to be an old ship with smoke bellowing out of the top. As Shuna approaches, a woman pops her head out of the window. Shuna explains he is looking for food and shelter for the night. The woman says nothing, only points to a small opening on the side of the ship. Shuna gets an uneasy feeling and decides to flee this place while the woman in the window shouts at him. Shuna then sets up camp for the night, only to have the occupants of the ship follow him and capture him. Shuna fights back with blade and bullet, blasting the woman's hand off. The cloaked people flee and the woman crawls away as her cries die out slowly among the dunes. By this time, Shuna has traveled across many different lands and abandoned villages, until one day passing an armored wagon. Shuna watched the heavily armed wagon go by and noticed something inside. The wagon was packed with people. Shuna passed many wagons, much the same, until he reached a bustling city. In the fortress town. Inside the city walls, Shuna realizes that its main trade is people. Shuna, in search of the golden seed in the city walls, ends up having to speak with the slave traders. The slave traders are the ones who bring the already harvested seeds into the city. These men are rude and crass, and they don't tell Shuna anything. As he is leaving, he comes across two young women. He gives them some bread to eat, as a scummy man tells Shuna he can trade his gun for the women. Shuna almost makes the deal, but then the older girl jumps up and tells him not to. The scummy man beats the girl while Shuna tries to stop him. Shuna is then forced out of the city with tears in his eyes. Shuna sets up camp on the outskirts of town and is approached by a strange little old man. The strange man joins Shuna at the fire. He then tells Shuna the whereabouts of the golden seed. He says Shuna must keep traveling to the west, to the land of the godfolk. The old man says no one has ever returned from the land of the godfolk, and then drifts off to sleep. Attack. Before the sun rises, Shuna has already set out on his journey, but first he must make a detour back into the city walls. He breaks into the scummy man's operation and demands to know where the women have gone. He tells Shuna they were in one of the armored wagons headed out of town. Shuna furiously rides out of the city in pursuit of the wagon. As he comes across it, he starts firing, blasting all of the armored guards off the top and finding the keys to free the women. The rest of the slaves stay put in the wagon, fearing the repercussions, but the women were set free from their shackles and join Shuna on his journey. The other slave traders are in hot pursuit of Shuna and the women, but they run day and night until they reach the edge of the world. Shuna's steed, the Yakul, was exhausted, and if it had to run any more, it would have surely died. The women tend to the Yakul. Shuna turns towards the way they came, in preparation to meet the slave traders in battle. He then sets up traps for the slave traders, and when they are in sight, he sets off the traps by firing at hidden bullets he placed in the rocks, creating small explosions. These traps spook the slave traders' steeds and they go tumbling off the world's edge. In that moment, a bright light comes over Shuna. When he looks at the light, he is startled to see it as a face. It streaked across the sky, and Shuna knew he was close to the land of the godfolk. The land of the godfolk. Shuna starts making his descent into the land of the godfolk down a sheer cliffside. He travels deeper and deeper down the cliffside until he reaches a beach which lays below the sun and the clouds. The land of the godfolk is at the other side of a vast and angry ocean. Shuna, exhausted, washes himself off in the water, then falls into a deep sleep. As he awakens, he is in a warm and beautiful ocean filled with strange and mythical creatures. This island itself is teeming with life. Shuna is in awe of its beauty. As he makes his way through the dense forest-covered island, he stumbled upon a giant with a parade of creatures following it. The giant came to a clearing in the forest and collapsed. The parade of animals begins to eat the giant. Shuna could barely watch as just then another giant came up behind him and passes by without taking notice, only to collapse in the same clearing as the last giant. He passes by droves of giants headed to the same spot. As the forest begins to thin out, he comes across a large and mysterious object in the middle of a cleared field. As he approaches the object, he finds a small hole and glances in. As he gets closer to the object, he can feel it breathing. Whatever it is, it's alive. Shuna flees back to the forest in shock. That evening, the same face that flew over him on the cliffside hovers over the strange object. The face begins to pour something out of its mouth. It was pouring humans into the strange object. Shuna pieces together that the humans are the ones from the slave trade. As the people went into the top of the strange object, giants started coming out the bottom. The giants then scattered across the empty field and started spitting golden seeds from their mouths. The crops began to grow alarmingly fast. By the time the sun rose, the fields were covered with lush green crops. Shuna looked around him as everything was covered in a lush greenery, including his rifle. Shuna crept into the field and snatched some of the golden seeds. The giants in the field began to cry out. Shuna frantically fled the field and plunged himself into the dark waters to escape the land of the godfolk. Thea. A year has passed since Shuna had left the women and the Yakul at the edge of the world. They began living with an old woman in a small village to the north. Thea and her younger sister worked hard for the old woman. In the evenings, Thea could only wonder whatever became of Shuna, yearning to see him once more. One evening, Thea could hear what she thought was Shuna's voice calling for help. Thea mounted the Yakul, who was eagerly wanting to follow the sound as well. As they reached the edge of the village, they found a ghastly-looking figure wandering through the night. Thea then called out Shuna's name. The figure slowly turned with vacant eyes towards Thea and the Yakul. Thea then took him back into the storeroom where they stayed and fed him. Shuna had forgotten everything as he sat there silently devouring his food. As Shuna slept, Thea looked into his pouch to find the golden seeds. Thea then fashioned Shuna some new clothes and kept his presence quiet to the rest of the village. Shuna slept through the winter months. As spring came, Thea plowed a small plot of land and set up Shuna in a little hut right outside the plot. Shuna reached into his pouch and placed the golden seeds in the ground. Thea worked hard looking after her daily chores and Shuna. He was always on her mind. One morning, Shuna had crawled from his hut to the small plot of land. Right in front of him, the golden seeds had started sprouting. Thea's little sister began to laugh and dance, something she had not done for a very long time. A small smile returned to Shuna's face as well. One day, the old woman approached Thea and said she must pick a man from the village as her husband or she will be forced to leave. The old woman dressed Thea up in the finest garbs as the men all lined up. Thea stated that she will only marry the man who can ride the Yakul. All of the suitors were quickly thrown off the untamable Yakul. As the last of the men tried, Thea's younger sister came through the crowd with Shuna, who quickly mounted the Yakul, leapt over the villagers, and ran off. Much to the dismay of the old woman, Thea's husband was chosen. One summer day, a massive storm blew in, covering the lands with rain, sleet, and thunder. Thea ran to the small plot of land to help Shuna cover the golden seeds. As the storm passed, Thea could hear her name being called. It was Shuna. He had begun to speak again. They embrace one another as a torrent of tears fills her eyes. The more the crops grew, the more Shuna began to recover. Summer turned to autumn, and with a knock at the door, Shuna entered the house with an armful of freshly harvested crops. Though the slave traders did return to the small village, Shuna and Thea helped the villagers fight them off. When the time was right, they had enough golden seeds in their possession and left enough for the villagers. Shuna, Thea, and little sister left the village to start their own journey. The end. What a beautiful story. Miyazaki ties a nice little bow on the entire story, and you know I'm a sucker for a happy ending. The illustrations in this story are much like the ones from the Princess Mononoke first story. They are just rough storyboards with some watercoloring. This story also reads much like a children's book with blocks of text over it and beside the illustrations. Though they are just initial storyboards, they are still beautifully done. I would not expect anything less from Miyazaki. Now, I mentioned it earlier, but a few years ago I covered The Princess Mononoke, the first storybook. In that review, I had previously stated that,
though I am a gigantic fan of Princess Mononoke, it's probably one of my favorite Miyazaki films out there. I don't really have much to say about the comparison between the two. This story is so far removed from the film, it's really not even worth trying to compare them.
So in the first Princess Mononoke book, I had compared it to some of Miyazaki's other works, but this story, Shuna's Journey, is Princess Mononoke. Shuna's character is pretty much the male version of Nausicaa, and is obviously a strong base for the character Ashitaka. Now, for some reason I had originally thought that this story was like a continuation or the aftermath of Nausicaa, but really it's the storyboards and the early concept for Princess Mononoke, containing panels and scenes that are almost identical to one another. The old man sitting by Shuna's fire, telling him he needs to head to the west to the Forest of the Gods, Shuna riding a yakul and entering a bustling city, the plants overtaking his rifle. I can go on. Anyway, I'll move on to the presentation of this story. The book itself is beautiful. The book comes with a dust jacket, but let me tell you, this book is much more striking without the jacket. A deep blue with a wonderful reflective gold text. Amazing. And on the inside is a baby blue that complements the outside cover. I think it's a great little coffee table book. And does it look good on a shelf? Yes. Yes, it does. Now, on to the real brass tacks here. This story costs $37 Canadian. For perspective, the last review that I did was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, and that is only $3 more than this book. So, The Last Ronin is $40 and you get another 100 pages and a larger book format. So in my eyes, this would be more of a collector's item. Overall, Shuna's Journey is a great little story, but much like Princess Mononoke, the first story, it's an early draft of a better tale to come. If you're a Miyazaki fan, I suggest picking it up for your collection. Total page count, 160. Total volumes, 1. Total score, 3 out of 5.
Thank you so much for watching once again, everybody. Things are going great on the channel. We're working our way up to 600 subscribers, so I'm gonna have to start planning something for the 600 subscriber special. I have lots of content. I got lots of content planned, got lots of things coming out. I just released a review on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, and I also put out a new upbeat music playlist, so check those out. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share and comment and do all of the things that you have to do on YouTube. Just do them. Do them. Anyway, thank you so much for watching once again. I'm ZombieJohnny. Peace.